Hey there, fellow history enthusiasts and gamers. Welcome back to Historically Gaming, where we dive into the past while enjoying some cozy gaming. Today we're exploring the life and legacy of a remarkable woman who played a pivotal role in the fight for women's rights in America, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. While we discuss this amazing powerhouse of a woman, we are going to be doing some Star Path duties for the night show Star Path and some chores around my valley in Disney Dreamlight Valley. So go ahead, grab your controllers, a warm cup of coffee, and let's journey back in time. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was born on November 12, 1815 in Johnstown, New York. Stanton described her mother, Margaret Livingston, as a tall, queenly-looking woman who was courageous, self-reliant, and at her ease under all circumstances in all places. Her father, Daniel Cady, was a prominent lawyer and judge in the state of New York, and Stanton described him as, "My father was a man of firm character and unimpeachable integrity, and yet sensitive and modest to a painful degree. There were but two places in which he felt at ease, in the courthouse and at his own fireside. Though gentle and tender, he had such a dignified repose and reserve of manner that as children we regarded him with fear rather than affection." Growing up in a family that valued education, Elizabeth was exposed to the legal world through her father. This early exposure to law and justice sparked her interest in social reform. In her autobiography, which we'll talk about more later in this video, Stanton links her tenacity and drive for human rights activism and political interests back to before she was born, by stating, quote, "With several generations of vigorous, enterprising ancestors behind me, I commenced the struggle of life under favorable circumstances on the 12th day of November, 1815, the same year that my father, Daniel Cady, distinguished lawyer and judge in the state of New York, was elected to Congress. Perhaps the excitement of a political campaign, in which my mother took the deepest interest, may have had an influence on my prenatal life, and given me the strong desire that I have always felt to participate in the rights and duties of government." Despite the societal norms of her time, Elizabeth was determined to pursue education and intellectual growth, setting the stage for her future activism. Stanton got her formal education at Johnstown Academy and at Emma Willard's Troy Female Seminary in New York. During her studies, Stanton stood as the only woman in her higher education classes and was prevented from the New York bar due to her being a woman. Her experiences and education fueled the fire Stanton had for the rights of women. She believed that women had the inherent right to have the same rights as any man has been given, and was fiercely committed to making sure she made that happen. Stanton went on to marry abolitionist lecturer Henry Stanton in 1840. During their wedding ceremony, Stanton protested the use of the word obey. Fittingly for their honeymoon, the activist couple traveled to London for the World's Anti-Slavery Convention. While at the convention, Stanton met fellow abolitionist Lucretia Mott, where both women bonded over their frustration in regard to the exclusion of women during the convention proceedings. The two friends vowed that once they returned home to the States that they were going to bring together their own convention for women's rights. And 8 years later, they did just that. In 1848, Elizabeth, along with her friend Lucretia Mott, organized the first women's rights convention in Seneca Falls, New York. This historic event marked the beginning of the women's suffrage movement in the United States. At the convention, Elizabeth presented the Declaration of Sentiments, the groundbreaking document that called for equal rights for women, including the right to vote. This document was an expansion of the Declaration of Independence to include the words woman and women. This pivotal document also called for social and legal changes to elevate women's place in society and listed 18 grievances, from the inability to control their wages and property, or the difficulty in gaining custody in divorce, to the lack of the right to vote. Stanton was not just an advocate for women's right to vote, but women's rights for higher education, a professional life, the legal ability to own property, as well as the ability to get a divorce. This bold move challenged the status quo and laid the foundation for future advocacy. Before we get into the next part, and we discuss Stanton's new badass friend, I want to ask you a quick question. What historical figure do you want me to cover next? It could be anyone from any time period. I'm planning content for 2025 and would love to cover your favorite historical figures or events. Got a burning question that you just need an answer to? I got you. Go ahead and drop your ideas in the comments, and you just might see it in a future video. Which also reminds me, you should probably hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you get a notification of when I make that video of the topic that you suggested. Just saying, it might be helpful. Anyway, let's get back to Elizabeth Cady Stanton and find out who her new friend is. While Stanton was still adamant for the legal rights of women, the right to vote eventually became her top priority. In 1851, Stanton met Susan B. Anthony, and the two joined forces to fight for the women's movement. Elizabeth's partnership with Susan B. Anthony became one of the most influential collaborations in the women's rights movement. Together, they campaigned tirelessly for women's suffrage, traveling across the country to give speeches and organize rallies. Their friendship and shared vision for equality were instrumental in advancing the cause despite facing significant opposition and societal backlash. In 1862, after moving to New York City, Stanton joined the Civil War efforts, as did her friend Susan B. Anthony. The two women advocated vehemently for the 13th Amendment that would later pass and bring an end to slavery. After the Civil War, Stanton was able to begin traveling more, bringing her cause to a plethora of communities, spreading her message of equality and women's rights. Stanton and Anthony would go on to oppose the 14th and 15th Amendments, which gave black men the right to vote, because the right was not extended to women as well. This caused a rift in the women's movement, leading to Stanton and Anthony to create the National Woman Suffrage Association, or NWSA. Eventually, the two movements did come back together, forming the National American Woman Suffrage Association, or NAWSA. As noted by the National Park Service, quote, she allied the movement and her resources to Victoria Woodhull, who claimed the right to love as she pleased without regard to marriage laws. She supported Elizabeth Tilton, a supposed victim of the sexual advances of clergyman Henry Ward Beecher. She broke with Frederick Douglass over the vote in the 1860s and congratulated him on his marriage to Helen Pitts in 1884. When others, including family, criticized their interracial marriage. Stanton was a complicated personality who lived a long life, saw many changes, and created some of them, unquote. In her later years, Elizabeth continued to write and advocate for women's rights, authoring several books and articles, including 3 volumes of The History of Women's Suffrage, 1881 to 85, which she wrote with Susan B. Anthony and Matilda Jocelyn Gage. In 1895-98, Stanton published The Woman's Bible. According to the National Women's History Museum, the Woman's Bible was a book in which she voiced her belief in a secular state and urged women to recognize how religious orthodoxy and masculine theology obstructed their chances to achieve self-sovereignty. She also went on to write her autobiography called 80 Years and More, recounting her efforts and legacy, which I think is such a boss move. Writing your own autobiography? Heck yeah. I'll link the autobiography below, so if you want to read it, you can check it out down there. Elizabeth Cady Stanton eventually passed away at the age of 87 years old on October 26, 1902, in New York. Unfortunately, she was not able to see how her work laid the groundwork for the eventual passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting women the right to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton's legacy lives on as a pioneer of the women's rights movement, inspiring generations to continue the fight for equality. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Her courage and determination remind us of the power of advocacy and the importance of standing up for what is right. I believe talking about the people before us that fought for so many of the rights we have today can bring hope to the present and the future. There are tons of people out there that are fighting for human rights today and in the future. Heck, you just might be the next one. Who knows? Nonetheless, I hope stories like these of perseverance can help bring some hope for the future. While history doesn't fully repeat, it sometimes rhymes, and we can use the past to make a better future. If you enjoyed this historical exploration, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more adventures through time. Until next time, keep gaming and keep learning. Bye!